It's a quiet Tuesday morning, and your phone buzzes. An email says rent paid. Another one pops up. Groceries covered, utilities and phone bill, all handled. But wait, no paycheck came in. And you're not even rich. You're just earning money without working for it. Yeah, what if I told you this isn't luck or some internet trick? It's just dividends, and there's a fast, legit way to build them. Hi, I'm Jack, and today I'll show you how $2,900 a month isn't a dream. It's just simple math. Subscribe, because this one can change how you see money. For those who still are having a hard time knowing what dividend is, it is just a company sharing its profits with you. That's it. When a company makes money and doesn't need all of it to grow, it can send a portion to its shareholders. If you own the stock, you get paid, usually every 3 months. But here's something most people don't realize. Not every company pays dividends. Many fast-growing companies keep all their profits and reinvest them back into the business. That's common in tech or startups. Dividend-paying companies are usually older, more stable, and they generate steady cash every year. Now, when people talk about dividends, they often focus on one number called dividend yield. Dividend yield is the annual dividend divided by the stock price. If a stock costs $100 and pays you $4 per year, that's a 4% dividend yield. But there's another number that matters just as much, called the payout ratio. This tells you how much of the company's profit is being paid out as dividends. If a company earns $10 per share and pays $5 as dividends, the payout ratio is 50%. That's usually healthy. But if it earns $10 and pays $12, that's a 120% payout ratio. That means the company is paying more than it earns. That can't last. That dividend is living on borrowed time. Most people chase the highest yield they see, without checking if it can survive. But why $2,900 a month? Because this isn't about getting rich. It's about covering life. Rent, food, utilities, transport, basic freedom. When you add it up, $2,900 a month comes out to $34,800 a year. That's the target. Once you have the target, the math becomes very clean. If dividends are paying you every year, we can work backward. The formula is simple. Required capital equals your yearly income goal divided by your dividend yield. Let's say your portfolio earns a 3% yield. You divide $34,800 by 0.03. That means you need about $1,160,000 invested. But if your portfolio earns 4%, the number drops. 34,800 divided by 0.04 comes out to roughly $870,000. Now, if you push to a 5% yield, the required capital falls again. 34,800 divided by 0.05 is about $696,000. This is why yield matters so much. A small change in percentage can shave off hundreds of thousands of dollars from your goal. And that's where the problem lies. Higher yield usually means higher risk. Companies paying very high dividends are often under stress. So the real question isn't just how high the yield is, it's how safe that yield is. And that brings us to the part most people get wrong. How do you increase yield without destroying your capital? Well, here's the blueprint. Think of a dividend portfolio like layers. First layer is Tier 1. These are dividend kings and blue-chip companies, big and reliable. They've been paying dividends for decades. Their yields are lower, usually between 2.5% and 4%, but they're stable. This is your foundation. Second layer is REITs, or real estate investment trusts. These own things like apartments, offices, and warehouses. By law, they must pay out about 90% of their income as dividends. That's why their yields are higher, usually 4% to 7%. Third layer is high dividend ETFs. These are baskets of dividend-paying stocks. One purchase gives you instant diversification. The yields are solid, and the risk is spread out. There's also a bonus layer, preferred shares and similar structures. They often pay higher dividends, but they're more complex. These are optional, not required. Putting all of these together, you'll get a 40% in blue-chip dividend stocks earning about 3.2%, 30% in REITs earning around 5.8%, 30% in high-dividend ETFs earning roughly 4.5%. When you blend all of that, your average yield comes out to about 4.35%. Now remember our income goal, $34,800 a year. Divide that by 4.35% and you land right around $800,000 in total capital. But well, taxes and inflation quietly eat into that yield, and if you ignore them, the math will definitely break. Not all dividends are taxed the same. Some are qualified dividends, which usually get lower tax rates. Others are taxed as ordinary income, which can be much higher. Where you hold your investments matters a lot. In tax-deferred accounts, dividends can grow without being taxed right away. That changes the math more than most people realize. Next is inflation. If your portfolio yields 4%, but inflation is 3%, you're not really gaining 4%. Your real return is closer to 1%. Real yield is simple. It's your dividend yield minus inflation. If you don't beat inflation, your money slowly loses buying power. Now there's another risk people don't talk about much. It's called sequence of returns risk. If markets drop early while you're taking income, your portfolio shrinks faster. On top of that, dividends can get cut during recessions. They don't disappear forever, but the timing hurts. A portfolio earning 4.35% sounds great. But with 3% inflation, the real growth is small, barely enough to move forward. Then how do you defend against these silent killers? This is how you lock in that $2,900 a month. First, use tax-advantaged accounts whenever possible. Accounts that let your dividends grow without being taxed every year are powerful. Whether it's a retirement account or a tax-free structure, this alone can add years of progress without you doing anything extra. Second, dividend reinvestment plans, or DRIPs. Instead of taking the cash early, dividends automatically buy more shares. More shares mean more dividends. This is compounding, but not the magical kind. It's just math doing its job. Third is tactical rebalancing. When one part of your portfolio gets expensive, you trim it. When yields rise because prices fall, you add. Now the safety net. You keep buffer assets, bonds or cash that cover expenses during market drops. That way, you're not forced to sell dividend stocks when prices are low. So if a 45-year-old builds a hybrid portfolio, 50% in dividend stocks, 25% in REITs, 25% in bonds and cash. Over time, dividends grow. The buffer absorbs shocks. Eventually, the income becomes steady and predictable. That's when the $2,900 becomes reliable. But how long does this actually take? That's the real deal. Let's say you save a fixed amount every year, and your portfolio earns about 10% total returns. And around 4% comes from dividends, and the rest comes from growth and reinvestment. Now, you save $30,000 a year. At that pace, with steady investing and reinvesting dividends, it takes roughly 18 to 20 years to reach about $800,000. That's the level where $2,900 a month becomes possible with a solid dividend strategy. But if you save $50,000 a year instead, same returns, but the timeline shrinks to roughly 12 to 14 years. This is why savings matter more than stock picking early on. But there's one thing these numbers assume: calm markets. And markets aren't always calm. They tend to be chaotic all the time. Then what happens when things break? Well, let's take a look back at 2008. Stock prices collapsed. Some dividends were cut. Others kept paying. The companies that survived had strong cash flow and manageable debt. The ones that failed were stretched too thin. Then 2020 hit. The COVID crash was fast and brutal. Prices fell hard, then recovered quickly. Many companies paused or reduced dividends, especially in travel and energy. But others barely flinched. And here's the pattern. Dividends get cut when profits disappear or debt payments come first.
They hold when cash keeps flowing. That's why quality matters more than yield. When markets fall, you don't dump everything. You use your buffer assets. You shift toward companies that kept paying through the storm. The mistake most people make is reacting emotionally, selling at the bottom, locking in losses, breaking the plan. Once you understand how downturns really behave, they stop being scary. But there's one more debate we need to settle: dividends versus growth. And the answer might surprise you. Dividends feel better because they pay you now, but that doesn't always mean they perform better. If you look at history, total return often wins. That means stock price growth plus dividends reinvested. Broad market indexes like the S&P 500 have beaten many dividend-only portfolios over long periods. But there's a trade-off. Dividend portfolios tend to be less unstable. Prices move less, and the income feels more stable. That helps emotionally, especially when you're living off the money.
Growth portfolios can grow faster, but the swings are bigger. And if you're withdrawing during a downturn, sequence risk becomes a real problem. Selling shares at low prices hurts more than living off dividends that still pay. That's why many people land in the middle. A hybrid approach is suggested. Growth assets early on to build capital faster, then a gradual shift into dividends as income becomes the goal. You get growth when you're building and stability when you're spending. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to see how this fits into the bigger picture of financial health, watch our next video on the real signs you're doing well financially.